So here we have Zechariah chapter 5. Are you guys hearing me okay? Is everybody okay? You can hear me all right? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and start reading Zechariah chapter 5, and then we'll discuss. Here's what it says. Then I turned and lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a flying scroll. And he, that is the angel, said to him, What do you see? And I answered, I see a flying scroll. The length thereof is 20 cubits, and the breadth thereof 10 cubits. Then he said to me, This is the curse that goes forth over the face of the whole earth. For everyone that steals shall be cut off as on this side according to it. And everyone that swears shall be cut off as on that side according to it. I will bring it forth, said Yahweh of hosts, and it shall enter into the house of the thief, and into the house of him that swears falsely by my name, and it shall remain in the midst of his house, and shall consume it with the timber thereof and the stones thereof. Then the angel that talked with me went forth, and said to me, Now lift up your eyes and see what is this that goes forth. And I said, What is it? And he said, This is an ephah that goes forth. He said, moreover, This is their resemblance through all the earth. And behold, there was lifted up a talent of lead. And this is a woman that sits in the middle of the ephah. And he said, This is wickedness. And he cast it into the middle of the ephah, and he cast the weight of lead on the mouth thereof. Then I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, there came out 2 women, and the wind was in their wings, for they had wings like the wings of a stork. And they lifted up the ephah between the earth and the heaven. Then said I to the angel that talked with me, Where do these bear the ephah? And he said to me, To build it an house in the land of Shinar, and it shall be established and set there on her own base. Hello. That is bizarre. Incidentally, and I'm gonna stop sharing for just a moment. I know that there is probably a lot of ideas floating around out there on the internet and in your minds regarding the significance of this. And I don't want to go too deep at this point, but I just thought I would ask anybody, what is your initial impression of what we're seeing here? Go ahead, Jerry.
I think you look at a nuclear weapon.
Uh-oh.
Right? Doesn't have to be nuclear. It could be any missile.
Yeah.
Flying it was like a missile. It's got its width. It's got its length. Michael Ruse got a whole book out on this, which I read several years ago.
I remember.
The lead and everything, and the thing is the lead in the warhead of a nuclear missile, which is my field of expertise. And to me, that's exactly what it's talking about.
It is certainly thought-provoking, isn't it? Anybody else? Keith, what do you got, buddy? You got to unmute yourself, bud.
I'll just add a little more to help clarify some of the stuff that Jerry's saying and how deep Rude went into it. When he looked at the Hebrew, he had some other scrolls, Hebrew scrolls, and the word Isha was actually, he was saying that it was actually Ish, or the word for fire, in the lead, and then talking about the 2 women with wings like storks being some sort of jet, picking it up and taking it under its belly, because it can be delivered as a weapon. So there's a lot to what Jerry's proposing, but at the same time, I mean, it is pretty fantastical when you look at that view, because if he's in the text, it says there will be these all over the world. This is what they look like all over the world. And we've been proliferated with so many nuclear weapons. Everybody's got them. And they're standing upright on their own little shrines, ready to launch at any time, it seems like. So it could be something, a foresight of this is how he explained what his vision showed him. And the thing that concerns me is, so when you look deeper at it, about in that text, it was actually asking, who is going to be burned or cut off with these things, right? Thieves and those who don't keep the word. And so I don't know.
That's a good question, and that's something that I had to consider, because I'm not foreign to this idea about this talking about thermonuclear war and stuff. But I also had questions. It's like, well, what does that mean? I mean, if this is thermonuclear war going on around the world, does that mean that it's only affecting those who are thieves and who swear falsely?
Right.
That is a little bit puzzling for sure. So yeah, that's a very popular idea regarding
So the only other thing is, if you look at it as scrolls as a covenant, and people who have made covenants with other gods or something, and these scrolls represent their allegiances versus the allegiance to the real God, and then I could see it could be sorted out more, like you're saying, to people who keep a different faith or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good ideas, and thank you for sharing that, Daryl or Carla, one of the other of you.
Just to tag on to what Keith just mentioned, when I looked at the interlinear translation there in verse 3, it's in mine here it says it's the curse that's going forth over the face of the whole land, but that word for curse is Allah, which is pertinent in today's earth.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yeah, I noticed that Allah is quite fascinating. Who is it? It's Tracy Tim. What's up, Tracy Tim?
I was just curious about how it says this flying scroll that goes flying over the earth, and it says its length is 20 and 10 cubits. And he said, this is the curse that goes over the face of the whole earth. And from now on, everyone who steals shall be cut off according to it. So I'm like, according to the scroll, maybe? And everyone who swears from now on shall be cut off according to it. And it's like the same word used in Psalm 40, verse 7, which says, then I said, lo, I come, in the roll or scroll of the book it is written of me. I delight to do your will, my God, and your Torah is within my inward parts. So I was kind of thinking of that as being like a Torah scroll, and this is like the judgment of some sort that is coming upon the whole earth. But it was just a thought.
No, I think that's a good thought. I think it's a good thought for sure. And I think, in fact, I think it's a wonderful thought. I think that we need to, and that's kind of my mission this evening, is to kind of explore these words. There are certain key words in here that definitely need to be looked at more carefully and more closely, and traced back to their first time that they were used, and where else are they used, and what can we glean from that? Because I think there's some fascinating things here. Can we connect those things to thermonuclear war? I don't know. Maybe we'll have to see. But it's pretty clear to me that there's a lot packed in here. But I'm delighted that you picked up on Psalm 40, because I intend to go there in just a moment. Any other just brief comments? Yeah, go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, that closing thing about the built a house in the land of Shinar, and I believe that was the place in Shinar would be Iran now.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yes.
this is related to Iran somehow.
Yeah, it's very likely that it is related to Iran. Sorry, I'm adjusting my camera slightly. Oh, there we go. Yeah, it is likely that it's related to Iran in some way. I mean, that makes sense for a lot of people considering what's going on in the world over there.
And Iran's the one that's the biggest one spouting right now about all these things that it's threatening to do to the Christian world and of course the Jewish faith. So,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, any other comments? Okay. Well, what I want to do is I want to explore the different elements of this flying scroll. We're frankly not even going to come close to getting into this woman or fire in this ephah of lead. That's going to be down the road. We need to deal with this flying scroll for a few minutes. And then see if we can, make a determination about what this might symbolize, because it's certainly puzzling. But the first thing that I would point out to you, and I think I will share my screen with you again so that you can see some of the text that I intend to show you. This flying scroll is, as Tracy mentioned, it's actually, some translations will say scroll, others will say roll. You probably noticed that the Hebrew word there is Megillah, which is a rolled parchment. And this word Megillah is used about 21 times in the Tanakh, in the Old Testament. And what's curious to me is two things. Number one, the first time it is used, which Tracy alluded to, which was in Psalm 40 and verse 7 specifically, and then almost all, I believe it is, all other times it is used are by Jeremiah and Ezekiel. So it occurs to me that, do you know in the relation of the timeline when this author is writing in relation to Jeremiah and Ezekiel? Were Jeremiah and Ezekiel before Zechariah or after Zechariah? What's your opinion? Both authors wrote before Zechariah. And both authors, Jeremiah and Ezekiel, used this term, Megillah, almost exclusively. David used it in Psalm 40, but other than that, it is used entirely by Jeremiah and Ezekiel. So it occurs to me that perhaps these people, contemporaries that we're reading about, might be familiar with Jeremiah and Ezekiel. Remember that Daniel in the kingdom of Persia said that he discerned by reading the prophet Jeremiah that the period of the exile was almost over. So that tells me a couple of things. Jeremiah's scroll, Jeremiah's writings were fairly popular, and B, that Daniel is writing most likely before we're dealing with here. But it occurs to me that these hearers who are hearing about this flying Megillah might be familiar with the use of those terms by Jeremiah and Ezekiel. And so it would make sense for us to look at, what do Jeremiah and Ezekiel say about this? How do they use it? And what does it mean to them? Because it's likely to hold the similar historical, cultural context for our readers here as it is for us, if we can connect those dots. So the first thing that I will point out to you is, as Tracy said, this thing in the Psalms, which is fascinating. It says in Psalm 40 and verse 7 says, "Then I said, behold, I have come." In the scroll of the book it is written of me. I have delighted to do your will, O my Elohim, and your Torah is within my heart. Now that is very clearly to me, and I'm sure to many of you, a messianic psalm. That this is talking about the Messiah that is coming in the power of the Spirit and is, I don't actually remember with my partially functioning brain right now whether he actually spoke these words. Does anybody remember? Did Yeshua actually quote this proverb or this psalm, excuse me? I don't know that he did, but it wouldn't surprise me. But it's clearly the role of the book is written about him, and he has delighted to do the will of Father, and his Torah is definitely within his heart. Now that's preparing for us a paradigm of virtue of a Torah observant man who is delighting to do the will of Father, and that's got to be the Messiah, right? Now, contrast that with these passages in Jeremiah and Ezekiel. I think we might be meant to compare and contrast those things, because look at what it says here. In Jeremiah 36 and 1, we see something like this. It says, Yah spoke to Jeremiah in the 4th year that Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, was ruling over Judah, and he said, get a scroll and write on it everything that I have told you to say about Israel, Judah, and all the other nations since I began to speak to you in the reign of Josiah until now. Perhaps when the people of Judah hear about all the disaster I intend to bring on them, they will all stop doing the evil things they have been doing. If they do, I will forgive their sins and the wicked things they have done. So, it doesn't tell us specifically what is written in this scroll. We don't get the actual words that Jeremiah put in this scroll, but what it sounds to me like is that Jeremiah is supposed to summarize what he has said so far to Israel, Judah, and the other nations into a scroll and present it to Jehoiakim, the king. And you can read on from Jeremiah 36 where he peels off layers of the scroll and burns it and isn't really interested in hearing that message. But interestingly enough, he is told to write it again and present that data again, which is interesting. But here we see that these judgments are all about Judah, Israel, and the nations. So this is another instance of this scroll idea being used. And then what's interesting too, go ahead, it's Tracy, it's Hebrews 4 and 7, for it is not possible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins. What does she say? Behold, okay, so he is, the author of Hebrews is quoting that passage in Psalms 40, applying it to the Messiah. Thank you, I knew I had heard that before. Now, if you look at Ezekiel, I'm going to point out to you where we get this idea of a scroll again. Here is Ezekiel 2 and 7, and this one is fascinating. It says that in Ezekiel 2 and 7, you must speak, this is Yah speaking to the prophet, you must speak my words to them, whether they listen or not, for they are rebellious. As for you, son of man, listen to what I am saying to you. Do not rebel like that rebellious house. Open your mouth and eat what I am giving you. Then I looked and realized a hand was stretched out to me, and in it was written a scroll. He unrolled it before me, and it had writing on the front and the back. Written on it were laments and mourning and woe. And then I'm going to Ezekiel 3 and 1. This is the very next chapter. He said to me, son of man, eat what you see in front of you. Eat this scroll, and then go and speak to the house of Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he fed me the scroll. He said to me, son of man, feed your stomach and fill your belly with this scroll I am giving to you. So I ate it, and it was sweet like honey in my mouth. Fascinating thing here is this being told to eat this scroll. Now, did you notice anything about this scroll that is slightly similar to our scroll here in the book of Zechariah? Now, Zechariah is not told that anybody's going to eat this scroll, but is there anything similar about this scroll and that scroll? Anyone? Bueller? Okay. I'll tell you then. It is written on both sides, which is an unusual thing. Who is it, Jerry? What's up?
Seems to me the stone tablets were written on both sides when God gave the Torah at Mount Sinai.
Thank you for pointing that out. That is absolutely correct. There are very few instances in the Bible of somebody writing on both sides of something. And it's quite unusual. And so, yes, it says in, I don't remember where it was. I think it was Deuteronomy. No, maybe it wasn't Deuteronomy, where Moses came down from the mountain the second time carrying the new stone tablets. It says that they were written by the finger of God on the front and the back. This scroll that we're seeing from Zechariah appears to be written on the front and the back. This scroll that Ezekiel is talking about appears to be written on the front and the back. Do you remember any other scrolls that were written on the front and the back?
Isn't there one in Revelation?
Yes, there is one in Revelation. Now, and I'll point this out to you. I'm going to bring you to this passage, which is very interesting. Here in Revelation chapter 10, verse 8, we see something remarkably similar. It says, "Then the voice I had heard from heaven began to speak to me again and said, 'Go and take the open scroll in the hand of the angel who is standing on the sea and on the land.' So I went to the angel and asked him to give me the little scroll. And he said to me, 'Take the scroll and eat it. It will make your stomach bitter, but it will be as sweet as honey in your mouth.' So I took the little scroll from the angel's hand and ate it, and it did taste as sweet as honey in my mouth, but when I had eaten it, my stomach became bitter. And then they told me, 'You must prophesy again about many peoples, nations, languages, and kings.'" So that's interesting, and that is similar to Ezekiel eating that little scroll. Do you notice that the similarity there? Ezekiel said that it tasted as sweet as honey, but John here is saying, yes, it tasted as sweet as honey, but it also became bitter in my stomach. But this is not the scroll that is written on the front and the back. There is another scroll in the book of Revelation which does have writing on the front and the back, and that is the scroll that actually has the 7 seals on it. The one that the Messiah is going to be, taking this, breaking the seals on that scroll. Yeah, that one is written on the front and the back. Did you want to say something, Jerry?
Then I say that's Revelation 5:1.
Yeah, that's Revelation 5:1. That's apparently a different scroll. And I'm not exactly sure how to connect those things. I do know it's just interesting that here in Revelation 10 we have a little scroll that the prophet eats, but then in 5 we have a scroll that is written on the front and the back, but it's sealed with 7 seals, and the Messiah is the only one able to open it, apparently. So that's one element of this flying scroll. Okay, it is similar in certain ways to other scrolls that we see throughout the Bible from the beginning to the end. Tracy?
Kind of hypothesized that they are the same, or they could be the same scrolls, because Messiah is the one. Because I think the sealed scroll could be the Torah, because they talk about how I think it's, I don't know if it's the writer of, it's Paul or the writer of Hebrews, I can't remember exactly where it is, but it talks about how those who read Moses today, this veil remains on their heart, and they can't understand it. And we know that Messiah is the one that opens our heart to understand, and he's the only one worthy of this, to open the sealed scroll and reveal it to those to whom he chooses. And so, and then we see judgment coming out of these scrolls in the same way as this judgment that's written in the Torah. I don't know, I just kind of thought that they might be the same.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is entirely possible. I mean, there's a lot of similarities between these various rolls, these scrolls that we're seeing. Angela, did you want to say something?
Just to add to what Tracy was just saying, we were listening to Michael Oman, and his idea was that that scroll is the wedding ketubah, and that the bride's chastity has been challenged, and so the court is seated and they're breaking open the covenant agreement to see if, the whole thing where she has to drink the bitter waters, and that's what's getting ready to go down in Revelation. And if that's the case, if that's some kind of wedding agreement that's being broken open, that's basically what the Torah is. It's the conditions for the covenant, the blessings, the curses, the obligations, responsibilities of both parties, etc. That whole thing is wrapped up in that.
That's a delightful insight, and I will point out something else that connects with that. You notice in verse 3 here of Zechariah 5, it says that everyone who does thus and such will be purged away or cut off according to what is written on one side, and anyone who swears falsely will be cut off according to the writing on the other side. You notice if you look into the background of that word cut off, that's actually connected to divorce. It's like being sent away with papers. So yeah, there is an interesting idea to be connected there with being cut off or being divorced. So I've heard that before, that the scroll with 7 seals on it might be like a divorce document, and that's certainly an interesting thing. I think also we need to, and I don't know that we're going to answer these questions this evening, but thinking about, we have a whole lot of words that need to be dug through here regarding, why did he choose to say or reveal to the prophet, anyone who steals is going to be purged away, or anyone who swears or swears falsely by my name, because he elaborates on that in verse 4. So why those 2 particular violations? Are those representative of something else? And what is the word curse? I know that, I don't remember who mentioned it earlier, the curse is Allah, and curse is slightly different than swearing, the one who swears falsely. So we got some terms that we need to kind of sort through here that might give us a better understanding of what we're dealing with. But I think I don't have any other scriptures that I'm going to share with you for a couple of minutes, so I'm going to just take that away so I can see your lovely faces a little better. Who is it? It's Tracy Tim. Tell us what's up, Tracy.
It's me again. I was just thinking about the stealing. I had a cross reference to Jeremiah 23:30. And it talks about how he's against the prophets who steal my words, each one from his neighbor. I'm against the prophets who use their tongues and say he says, and those who prophesy falsely and cause my people to go astray by their lies and their frivolity. So it's, when you think about stealing and how Satan is described in the parable of the sower as snatching the word out of the heart lest they should believe and be saved. And I don't know, just kind of thinking of that with correlation to this Torah scroll, perhaps, and how people steal his words from others by not preaching the truth.
Yeah, that's good. Angela?
To add to what Tracy just said about the stealing from their neighbor, that stealing and swearing falsely by my name are in the Leviticus section, chapter 19, and those commandments are back to back in verses 11 and 12. And that whole section is dealing with loving your neighbor. So maybe that was like a shorthand pull from a section on loving your neighbor.
Yeah. Yeah, I wondered if maybe that was representative of something, that those two would speak volumes to somebody who had more cultural context. Carla or Daryl?
Yeah, just along those same lines, as we get down to like verse 8, and it talks about wickedness, and wickedness is such a mingling, and God doesn't want us mingling things together that shouldn't be. And you think of ways that the enemy, Satan, will steal, if you will, the word, and he twists it in the wickedness. He twists it and makes it something that it's not, but it sounds right. There's a lot of pieces that can sound right. And that's why, there's the command to not add or subtract from what he says. What he says stands on its own.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good insight. Good insight. I was going to ask, so clearly we have a lot of stuff that needs to be dug through, and I don't think we're going to get to it this evening, but I mean, I will point out a couple of things to you so that maybe over the next 2 weeks, before we get back together to study this again, that you will look into a couple of things, like why do you think he chose stealing and swearing falsely? What is it? Where have you heard ideas regarding enter the house and consume the house with timber and stones? Okay, that should be evoking some ideas in your mind right now. So there's a lot of words that need to be defined and ideas that can be explored. But before we get there, and I don't think we're going to get there tonight, that's why I said, look into it over the next couple of weeks when we get back together to study this deeper. Because I think if you start to connect all of these ideas, maybe something will become a little clearer and we'll have a better idea about what this curse is that's going across the face of the whole earth. But I wanted to bring your attention back to this flying scroll. And I think there's two things that we can just discuss briefly. And that is, this scroll is quite large. Now, did you notice that in Revelation and in Ezekiel, the scrolls were quite small? They were able to eat them. In fact, the one in Revelation seemed to be quite small. So I think it's curious that in those other references to these scrolls, they're small, and this one's ginormous. What do you make of that? Why is it 20, cubits long and 10 cubits wide? That's a very large scroll. And also, why is it flying? And have we heard of something else in the Bible that is also 20 cubits by 10 cubits? Does that connect to anything? Have you guys heard? Keith, what do you got for me, buddy?
Well, I'm just trying that picture that you're painting. So is this scroll unscrolled, unrolled? The two lines are unrolled and they're 20 cubits apart, and then of course it's 10 tall, and it's flying like a magic carpet?
That's a good question.
Is it rolled up tight and it's 20 cubits long, which is almost 40 feet long, and then if you wrap your arms around it, like the circumference is 10 feet in circumference, then that's more like the things that are being shot around right now,
Yeah, absolutely. So we don't know. The author is not, the Hebrew language there is not real clear to suggest that it's 10 feet tall and unrolled 20 feet 20 cubits long and flapping like a flying carpet. I don't know. It more likely seems that it's rolled up, But then how would you know that it had writing on front one side and the other side? I don't know that you would be able to tell that if it was rolled up. So that's a curious thing. Not sure that you could answer that one way or the other. But, one thing that you might be able to connect is, have you ever heard of those measurements before? Are you familiar with anything in the Bible that exactly measures 20 cubits by 10 cubits? Anybody have any ideas about that? Have you heard anything like that before? Well, I'll tell you. There are two things in the Torah, not in the Torah, excuse me, in the Old Testament, the Tanakh, that are measuring 20 cubits by 10 cubits. One is the holy place in Solomon's temple. Now, if you look at Exodus 26 has some details about those measurements, but it's not really clear. It doesn't say you shall make it 20 cubits by 10 cubits. That's not what it says. It says that it's got these hangings and measurements of smaller things within that space, and smarter people than I am have calculated, oh, well, that means that it's 20 cubits by 10 cubits in width, in height, or in width and in length. And okay, that makes sense. If you got to look at it a little bit more carefully. So that's one thing that is 20 cubits by 10 cubits. And the other is Solomon's portico, the porch of Solomon, when he built the temple. So do either of those things have any connecting value for you? The holy place of Solomon's temple or the Solomon's porch? Do either of those things hold any significance to you in the fact that they also share the same measurements as this flying Torah, this flying scroll?
Where is this porch?
The porch is in 1 Kings.
No, I mean like.
Oh, it's like the front of the temple. It's basically an architectural ornamentation on the front of the tabernacle. Not tabernacle, but temple, excuse me. So, yes. Does anybody have any ideas about connecting either one of those two measurements? Well, I'll tell you what it made me think of. The porch of Solomon, or Solomon's portico, I don't see any real spiritual significance to that, because it was just an ornamentation. It was an architectural accoutrement that was added to what Solomon built for beauty. And I don't, if there is something peculiar about that, I'm not really certain what that might be.
Did something happen to Yeshua at that location?
He was hanging out on, Yeshua was hanging out on Hanukkah.
Is that when they tried to kill him?
I think that might have been when they tried to kill him. Yeah, I'd have to look at that a little bit closer. But as to the portico or the porch of Solomon having some spiritual significance, I'm not really sure what that might be. Jacqueline?
I think, because also the early church, it said that that's where they met. So I wonder if that's a place where rabbis or teachers used to go to teach
That could be.
the word. Because, in the temple, they didn't really teach the word. So I wonder if on the portico is where they taught the word. So then I wonder if swearing falsely connects to the portico and thieving connects to the holy place.
That's an interesting idea. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. It kind of connects with what Tracy was saying a moment ago about stealing his words and kind of misportraying them to people. That's an interesting idea. One thing that kind of had a little bit of significance to me, and I'm not sure how much, is that if you connect it to the holy place, not the Holy of Holies where the Ark of the Covenant is, but when you first come into the tabernacle or the temple, you've got the menorah and the table of showbread and the altar of incense, and then the curtain, and on the other side of the curtain is the Ark of the Covenant. Well, that kind of connects to the very previous vision that we just read about, with this golden menorah and these olive trees that were feeding oil into this perpetually lit golden menorah. If he's telling us about this weird spiritual menorah which is in the holy place. And then he talks about this flying scroll, which measures the exact dimensions of the holy place. I don't know. That kind of was curious to me, that maybe there was some kind of a connection there. But that's, you can look at Exodus 26 and see some of the details there. But I think maybe it seems likely that the holy place is kind of connected there. But I think, why is it likely that the scroll did the scroll proceed from inside the temple, from inside the holy place? I think you might want to consider what types of things, what kind of activities happened there in the holy place, and can we connect that with something that might be in writing on this Torah scroll, like incense being burned and the menorah being lit and the showbread being displayed? I think that the holy place kind of speaks to holiness to me, an approaching Father, purity. You can see in Leviticus 9:23 that fire seems to have come out from the holy place and consumed the sacrifice when they first set this place up. So there's some interesting connections there. But I think we're just getting started, and this was kind of like an introduction. I'm going to let you guys go. I'm going to go to bed, and I know that some of you guys on the East Coast are probably tired. But I think I've introduced more questions than answers, and I apologize for that. But this is a very puzzling vision, and we're going to hash it out. But as I mentioned, go back through and start looking at some of these things, like, why did he choose these words, like being cut off or purged away according to writing on this side or that, or the stuff entering the house, and comparing that with the leprosy entering a house. I mean, there's so many interesting ideas that we need to connect there to try and make some sense of it. And I think that's what we'll do the next time we get together, is we'll take all of these ideas that are connecting to these different passages of Scripture and see if it's possible that we can put them together and get some kind of a clearer idea of what is this flying scroll that's going around and purging the earth of its liars and its thieves, its false swearers. So it's fascinating, and hopefully Father will enlighten us by his Spirit to help us make some sense of this.